So I played The Witcher 3, and I didn't like it very much. In fact, I think it's pretty bad and overrated. So in this video, I'll explain why. Firstly, I want to say that the game looks pretty good. The graphics are easily the best part of the game. And I also like the music. I don't like the gameplay very much. The gameplay is slow and clunky. It's like I always have to attempt to do something twice before it actually happens. The gameplay is easily the worst part of the game. The combat is very bad. Even fans of this game would agree with me. Even Dark Souls has better combat than this game, and that's saying something. The enemy telegraph animations are janky, and it makes it harder to avoid enemies' attacks, and it makes combat frustrating. Also, some of the enemies attack way too fast. My character is too slow for how fast some of the enemies are. It feels like I can never attack first. The wolves in particular are really annoying. I was able to get good, but the combat was never really good. Also, there's no damage indicators. You can get hit from something off screen a lot and not even know that it was coming. The enemies also have RNG patterns, which makes things less fair for the player. Sometimes an enemy will attack right after an attack, and sometimes they won't, with no visual or auditory indicators of that happening. I found myself relying on my Witcher spells way more than I wanted to, because the sword combat just felt so imprecise. Combat encounters just feel like a mess. At no point was I having fun with the combat. The combat is manageable, although still not fun when there's just one enemy. But once there's multiple enemies, the combat just turns into a mess. The combat is more focused on being flashy than fun. The horse is really bad. Roach is the worst vehicle I've ever used in a video game. He's just so clunky to use. He constantly gets stuck on rocks. He can't jump over even small ledges or cliffs. He can't sprint when you're in a dense town. The controls are clunky, and he's just not fun to use. He's somewhat okay in a wide open space, but when there's obstacles around, he's just not fun to use. Also, don't like how the control scheme gets locked depending on if you're in combat or not. This is just clunky and annoying. Also, don't like that you have to rewatch a cutscene if you die. Yeah, you can skip it, but it's annoying and unnecessary, especially if you're on a higher difficulty and you die a lot. Also, the checkpoints in this game are pretty obnoxious. There definitely needs to be more generous checkpoints, notably in the Baron quest line. There's also some pretty bad missions in this game, like the mission where you're in a cave and you can't see well. Well, I guess there's multiple missions like that, but I'm talking about the first one. And the mission where you have to stay in a circle and fight off multiple enemies. This is just annoying, and the game is too clunky to make this type of encounter work. Most of the missions are just forgettable. There were almost no missions that actually stood out to me. Most of them are just killing a bunch of enemies, following someone, searching for clues with your Witcher senses, talking to people, and shit like that. And maybe the occasional horse race. The missions are just not very memorable, especially paired with the fact that the combat sucks. So yeah, the missions weren't very fun. The open world is also pretty weak. Everywhere looks the same. There was never a moment where I went out of my way to explore something on the map. There was no castle in the distance or a mysterious cave I wanted to explore. Exploring the world just isn't that fun because there's nothing that you want to explore. You can't even go inside most buildings. Most of them are locked with no way to get in, with no key to find. Compare this to Skyrim, where you can go in most buildings. This just seems really lazy. On top of that, the NPCs are boring as hell. None of them have anything interesting to say. Now, most people praise the game for the story, but I don't think it was that good. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. The Witcher's goal for the first part of the story is to find Ciri. But why should we care about this? Geralt doesn't even seem that desperate to find her. He says she's like a daughter to him, but we don't really see a lot of evidence for that. We see a cutscene of Ciri and Geralt interacting in the beginning of the game, and we get some backstory and spoken dialogue until we finally find Ciri. But in the vast majority of the story, we get pretty much no development in this relationship. This relationship isn't fleshed out at all. This relationship needed way more screen time, especially considering finding Ciri is our main goal throughout a big portion of the story. I don't feel much emotion when Ciri and the others finally reunite at Kaer Morhen, because Ciri barely interacts with the rest of the characters, but yet we're supposed to act like their relationships are fully fleshed out. Same thing with Vesemir's death. I don't feel anything when he dies, because I don't really know him. There's just a lot of interactions with characters I just don't care about. Look at the quest with Baron. Why should I care about him or his situation? We barely even know him. We're choosing to help find his family because we need him to help us find Ciri, and it just turns out they ran away because he was such an asshole. He tells us his backstory, but I don't really care that much, partly because he's just told to us in dialogue. Given how narrative driven this game is, you'd think that they show us a cutscene of this. Most of the story consists of us talking to people that may or may not know information about Ciri. This could have been made interesting, but it isn't. There's just so much talking instead of showing in this game. Characters just don't stop talking, and none of it is interesting. And why should we care about helping this old guy find his goat? Most of the game consists of doing things for people in order for them to help us find Siri. And it's done in the most bland way possible. We literally just go somewhere, talk to someone, they tell us to do something, we do it, and then they give us information. It's really not that interesting. I tried to avoid skipping the cutscenes, but about 18 hours in, I gave up and started reading ahead and skipped the cutscenes. This game just feels too long. It's too convoluted and there's too much filler. Also, Geralt and Yennefer's relationship isn't fleshed out well either. Throughout the story, Geralt says he misses Yennefer, but that's all. Oh, and they have sex. And yeah, they flirt a bit, and they seem to have some conflict with each other, but it really isn't that engaging, and their conflict, quote unquote, isn't explored well at all. There was only one scene with them that I kinda liked. Also, I like this interaction with the sorceress in Novigrad, where we have a conversation about whether or not it's a good thing to reframe bad circumstances in a positive light, but it only lasts a few minutes, and we never talk about this again. So, yeah. Also, the WoW hunt wasn't handled very well. We barely see them throughout the game. I wish I knew a little bit more about them. That would have made me care a little bit more about the Battle of Kaer Morhen and the final battle with Eredin. They're basically just scary bad guys from another world that want to conquer Earth. And yeah, they briefly tell us that they need Ciri's Elder Blood to save their world, but that's it. The game wanted to have an epic ending, but the ending really wasn't that epic because I wasn't emotionally invested in the story or the characters. It was kinda cool when we were preparing for the WoW hunt at Kaer Morhen, and I just wish that I actually cared about the characters and our antagonists. Most of the game, I was just going through the motions. The game has some interesting lore, but it's not told to us in an engaging way. It's mostly told to us by spoken dialogue. In conclusion, this game isn't very good. The game was mostly a chore to play. The story was weak, the gameplay was pretty awful, and the only thing I liked was the graphics and soundtrack. My playthrough was just under 28 hours, but it felt at least twice as long. I thought the game would never end. When I finally beat the game, I was relieved that it was finally over. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Witcher 3. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe if you want, Patreon in the description if you want to support, and bye.